Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Workforce, manufacturing, commercial activity, intensely desperate policy, and social debate, and of course the broader economy. If those items were a list of ingredients for a recipe, what kind of dish do you think that would yield? Welcome again to the most widely watched source for Carolina business and public policy. I am Chris William, and as unpleasant and as unkind as much of our current dialogue is, will the direction we seem to be headed in turn and get better? I refer to the economy, the way we talk to one another, and the issues that are most prominent. We have a panel that we trust with this task of distilling out wisdom and foresight here in the Carolinas, and we will certainly begin with them in just a moment.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Walter Dalton from Isothermal Community College, Matt Martin of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, Charlotte Branch, and Louis Gossett of the South Carolina Manufacturers Alliance.
Hello, welcome to our program. Always talking about the fun stuff right before the cameras come on, but we're going to keep it going now. Lieutenant Governor, I still call you that, Walter, Mr. President, Governor. We'll start with you. You know, we get so lost in the dialogue and the debate about not just North Carolina House Bill 2 and the social issue it represents and the passion it represents. And South Carolina's, not too far from this issue, Louis, so we'll give you a chance to chime in. But when this eclipses everything else that's going on in the states and in our region, what are we missing here, Walter?
Well, I think we're missing some opportunities. I mean, HB 2 has become a national issue. DOJ and Department of Education sent out a notice yesterday. The federal courts will ultimately deal with that. What we're missing, I think, is an opportunity to rebuild the economy in these two states in a wonderful manner. I think we're well positioned. The Piedmont Crescent Corridor, which is from Raleigh to Atlanta, the hottest part of it being Charlotte, is one of the hottest places in the world today. But we need to be focused on the logistics of that because it won't stay hot unless you can move traffic. We need to focus on workforce development. As president of the community college, I think that is where our money should be going to a great degree. We work very much with manufacturing. We also have college transfer programs that are very affordable and very excellent. So I think we are perhaps missing an opportunity, or certainly our focus has been diverted from some things that can help all people raise all ships, and that's where we need to be focusing our effort.
Yeah, Matt, clinically, what are we missing here? From the, not just the Fed's point of view, but as a financial scientist, if you will, an economics expert, what are we missing here?
So focusing regionally, this idea of transportation, one of the things we hear a lot from our constituents as we try to understand the regional economy is the infrastructure issue. It probably shows up more in South Carolina where the gas tax is lower and you talk about roads and that sort of thing. So I think that's a big one, is how do you facilitate economic growth by making sure you have the roads, the bridges, the railroads, all that sort of stuff that helps drive the regional economy. I think nationally, if you recall, maybe a year or two ago even, the whole issue around economic disparity and economic mobility, this idea that we have a growing economy, how do we make it work for everyone, was a big issue, and we've lost some sight of that, I think. And I think regionally in the Carolinas, that's an important issue. It's multifaceted. It has to do with workforce development. It's got some other policy-related issues. So I think that's a big one as well. And then I'd throw in at the federal level the national debt issue. We've sort of lost sight that big animal, the large and growing national debt, is still out there, and we're going to have to deal with it at some point.
Yeah, Louis, do you think that a year from now that we won't be talking about the polarization and the social issue of not just HB2, but do you think we'll look back on it and say, yeah, we certainly got distracted, but do you think it's going to be business as usual in 12 or 18 months?
I think that's what we're trying to do in South Carolina. It's hard for me to speak for North Carolina right now because there's so much that's still going on there and going to be going on. But that bill's dead in South Carolina, and we're moving forward. And I think that we should be...
That bill never had a chance in South Carolina.
No, it did not. No, it did not. I mean, there were all kinds of things that you could do to, give it maybe a little bit of sunlight at the end of the tunnel, but it wasn't going to happen. So what we're focused on is the most important thing that we need to be doing is focusing on getting people jobs and getting them good jobs so that they can prosper and provide for their families and realize the American dream. And so you'll see us continue to focus in South Carolina now on roads and bridges. Infrastructure is essential, but also a big piece of infrastructure is workforce. And we're laser focused on those two things. And South Carolina, the same way we did with the Confederate flag, the same thing we did with this piece of legislation is resolve those issues and move forward and get about the business of actually helping folks create jobs in our state.
Walter, I know this probably just to kind of take some of the weight off of here. People are going to expect that you're going to be excited about education. You certainly were as Lieutenant Governor. You're president of Isothermal Community College. But how do you argue, let's take the heat and light and the gravitational pull of HB2 and any social issue off the table. Let's go back to arguing on the merits what's important, transportation and education. How do you make the argument that education should be the priority issue?
I don't think there's any question. What you look at is statistically it's proven that 67% of the jobs in North Carolina and South Carolina today are going to require credentialing beyond high school. That means education is very, very important. Also, if you look, about only 54% of our population, working population, have those types of credentials. So we have to invest in education, but we have to do it wisely. The cost of education is accelerating rapidly. There are ways that we can save money and achieve that goal. One is to drive more of the freshman, sophomore enrollment to community colleges. Our tuition is a fraction of the cost of the four-year schools, but we're very accessible, very affordable. Our instructors have their master's and their doctorate in our college transfer program. It's less capital intensive. You don't have to build dormitories. So that saves the state money, but I think it will allow more people to get that credentialing beyond high school. The other thing is look at that intersection of high school and higher education. Community colleges are right in focus right there. We've had great success with early colleges, and one thing we're trying to do at Isothermal.
And an early college is really the connectivity between a high school and the next level?
And the next level. It's a partnership between either a four-year institution or two-year institution. North Carolina, we have 80 early colleges, about 16,000 students in it. It's very successful, accelerates learning, ups the rigor, saves parents money. How do we bring that to scale so every child in North Carolina will have that opportunity? And Isothermal, we're aligning the public schools with our initiatives, working with the public schools, creating academies on business science, allied health, arts and sciences, and applied sciences, so that high school student can get their associate's degree or that credentialing that they need within 1 year beyond high school, not two. So it really cuts, and they do it for free. I mean, that will cut the student debt tremendously.
Yeah, and I don't want to jump over you here, Dr. Martin, but Louis, let me bring something in. Governor, you make a great argument, and you do it, as always, elegantly. Louis, in South Carolina, manufacturing is arguably, and I think Bobby Hitt actually said it the best when he said, South Carolina continues to lead the nation in a manufacturing renaissance. I believe that, and I think a lot of people believe that. However, there still is this brand of it's a path to the middle class for Americans who don't go to higher ed. How do you change that to say, not everybody needs a four-year degree, and it's not elitism to be in the four-year degree, but consider manufacturing, and here's the reason why. I mean, how do you change that?
Well, it's actually something that we've been aggressively involved in with something you saw, the Future Makers program in South Carolina, which is designed to educate children and, just as importantly, their parents about the opportunities in manufacturing today. It's a public-private partnership between my membership and the manufacturers in the state, and principally the Department of Commerce and Governor Haley. And what we are out there doing is making sure that folks now understand the wage differential between manufacturing and the average wage is profound. It's
How do you
about
make it
35%.
sexy, though? This is a question for both of you, by the way.
Get them in there. Get them in there and let them see it. And we're starting to see those results. When kids actually see the operations, when parents understand the numbers, when they understand that the factories are clean, they're safe, that the work is very challenging and it's new and it's something that people really embrace, when they see that, they're starting to react. And you're starting to see that if you really want to experience the American dream, in fact, my unofficial tagline for Future Makers is the rebirth of the American dream.
Mm-hmm. You make it sexy two ways real quickly. One, you tell them that a machinist at Isothermal Community College came out of the program and immediately got a job for $80,000. That's pretty sexy.
Yeah.
Secondly, we're involved in the Michelin Scholars Program. They're over in South Carolina, but a great apprenticeship program. So the more business and industry will step up and engage with our programs and allow apprenticeship programs so people can see firsthand that it is clean, that you do need STEM skills, and this is a good life, then I think they'll be attracted to it.
So do the numbers work, Matt?
For manufacturing employment?
Well, okay,
or?
so do the numbers work for manufacturing as these gentlemen have described it, but do the numbers work that there would be not just a manufacturing renaissance, but there would be a boost to the economy if more students, not just young people, but more students put their arms around this whole idea that apprenticeship, 2-year degrees, some type of education that's not a 4-year degree really would be a good thing.
Yeah, so the first thing you want to do is make sure you're getting kids through high school. So when you look nationally at the evidence, not graduating from high school puts you at a serious disadvantage for the rest of your career. So that's step number one, make sure we're getting kids graduated out of high school. And there's still a premium for a college degree. It's not shrunk at all over years. Yeah. So you're gonna want some portion of your population to have that. But the fact of the matter is, in the Carolinas, particularly in our population centers, we import some of those, right? Mm-hmm. So we can meet that demand. We have places young college graduates want to come and live. And then you want to have something that gives a wage premium for those that aren't going to college. And I think there are plenty of jobs out there, these so-called middle-skilled jobs. There's the income disparity in part is the premium on college and pulling some higher-end skilled jobs, but some of those are in the manufacturing and other fields as well. What you don't want is you don't want people trapped in those lower skilled jobs that emphasize the disparity.
And Matt, sorry to interrupt you. I think of, and these are Fed numbers as well as just federal, not just Federal Reserve numbers, but the Fed's numbers on unemployment in this nation is 5%. In South Carolina, it's around that. In North Carolina, maybe a little bit more. But even the Federal Reserve will say that is close to virtually full employment. So how do you find, and I guess it goes to the workers' skills gap, how do you find people that want to be retrained, let alone enough people in the economy to go back and to find a job in manufacturing?
I think part of it's going to be information, right? So we're going to approach these classes of jobs with some preconceptions. I think actually it's the parents that you have to work on. I hear these stories of kids saying, I'm interested in this, but my parents tell me I have to go to college. So you might have to do some informational work with the parents on what these jobs are, what they look like, and what the salaries are. But the market itself is going to move, right? So if there are shortages, employers are going to have to face the reality. And we're starting to see nationally wage growth starting to accelerate a little bit. So we might be coming to that point.
Are the parents the one holding it back?
Every career specialist I've spoken to in South Carolina has gotten this phone call. Did you tell my kid not to go to college? And in fact, I got it from a parent when I was talking to that parent's child about manufacturing opportunities. But, going back to something you said, though, about the Federal Reserve's position on full employment, I think the two biggest challenges in this country perhaps may be the national debt, 30 trillion 10 years from now. That's daunting. But just as important, I don't think we're at full employment at all. The labor participation rate is so low, and there are so many people out there that certain businesses compete with the government to hire. Government benefits can get you to a certain wage rate, and quite frankly, the motivation for folks to leave that and go. You ask the question, would it help the economy if more people are taking these manufacturing jobs? Think about those people that are 10 to 12 bucks an hour equivalent on federal and state benefits, moving into $54,000 an average job in manufacturing. That is an economic stimulus unlike almost any other, and it certainly would dwarf anything we saw 6 or 7 years ago.
I want to give you a chance. Before we do that, I want to tell you who's coming up on the program in the next few weeks. Christy Hall is the newest South Carolina Department of Transportation Secretary. She will be here. Speaking of DOT, North Carolina's DOT Secretary Nick Tennyson will also be on this program. Coming up, Dr. William Roper from UNC Healthcare is coming back, and Lynn Good, Chairman and CEO of Duke Energy, always in the news and always, and not just in energy circles. So, Governor Dalton, let's come back to you. You've all talked about wage growth. You've always talked about wages. Other hot buttons other tender political and business issues are equal pay, that is between male and female, and wages. And within wages, we talk about minimum wage. So how does all of the dialogue we've had so far, how does that square with where the minimum wage ought to be, where it ought to be legislated, and how you feel about equal pay?
Well, I think if you have enough people getting the right type of skills, hopefully you're not talking about the minimum wage.
So that's not even a debate.
Well, I think we need to look at raising all people to a skill level that's not a debate. But I will say, I mean, there is an income divide. There's no question about it. People can't live off the minimum wage, and that debate needs to occur. But the ultimate solution, I think, is to make sure that people are getting the credentials that they need. Here is what I think is one of the biggest challenges. We talk about unemployment, is the underemployment, and the fact 40% of North Carolina's workforce works in 5 counties. So while I do think we're well positioned with the Piedmont Crescent and both states will prosper, the urban areas are going to prosper. But there are other areas, significant areas in both states that are not prospering, and those people are underemployed, and they're on the road every day traveling back and forth. So what can we do? And I think it's going to take regionalization to stimulate the economy in some of these other areas.
I want to come back to that in just a second. You talk about rural-urban comparison. Both of y'all, the clinician here, but also the practitioner over here, about equal pay, but also minimum wage. Should it be set, or is there some manufacturing special elixir that is going to get us past to having mandate minimum wage?
Chris, I practice labor and employment law, and I believe their existing laws take care of the equal pay issue as it is. I think that's political, just like I think the minimum wage argument is political more than it is practical. I was just in Spain. They have kiosks in their fast food restaurants now. You go and you order there, and you don't talk to a person. They just simply hand you what you ordered. And by the way, those are American franchise operations. So you raise the minimum wage, that's going to happen. In the community I live in outside of Columbia, you can't hire anyone at minimum wage. Every fast food, every restaurant, every small business has got a sign saying help wanted. They're paying 10, 11 bucks an hour. So the market is taking care of that. And I agree with what the governor said. If we work on the skill side, if we make sure people understand the value of work and the opportunities that exist out there, minimum wage is not an issue. My members don't have a minimum wage issue directly because they don't pay it.
So I'm just going to pile on. So Target and Walmart going to $10 an hour. They're having a hard time finding workers. So that's not
So
necessarily.
the market's going to push that higher.
The market in part. And the other thing is, what are you trying to accomplish with the minimum wage? Are you really trying to help families, heads of households? Because if you raise the minimum wage, in part you're bringing in higher wages for teenage employees, not exclusively. It's not even a majority, but a significant chunk of those working at that wage are teenagers, and many of those are from middle-income families. So there are probably other policies that are more directed at those you want to help, like the Earned Income Tax Credit. So we have a national one. I think as we sit here, we don't have an Earned Income Tax Credit in either state.
No, we don't.
Yeah. 2 other issues, and we're going to run out of time if I'm not careful here. First one is transportation. We talked around it a little bit. Walter, It would seem like, and I know you argue for education, but transportation has got to be a pretty close second in priorities in both states, because transportation, as someone much smarter than me on this program said, transportation is really about building communities. It's not just getting people around a city or through a county. So how do we approach this idea of we are way underfunding transportation and infrastructure? How do we make sure that we at least bring it up to par?
That's a great question. I don't know where you find the money on the trees, but we focus on the issue. There's no question logistics. Again, we're well positioned. One thing is regionalization. And there was a proposal that I worked on about creating inland ports in what would now be the prosperity zone. So each inland port, it's the old Cameron Morrison good roads governor connecting every county seat up by hard surface road back in the 20s. What is the counterpart to that? I think it's an inland port in different regions of the state. And you can have those regions working on some of the financial issues in funding some of the logistics infrastructure that we're going to need. And it's going to take coordination with the two states, and I think it's going to take some federal help also. But I think if you look at Greenville, Spartanburg, Atlanta, Raleigh, Charlotte, the rural areas will benefit 15 to 20 years. How do we accelerate that and do it productively? But if we don't do something about the infrastructure, then what is a diamond for our future will quickly go away, because people are not going to stand in. Time is money, and sitting on the interstate and not able to move the truck is going to cost you the bottom line.
Is the South Carolina Ports Authority Chief Jim Newsom already figured that out? Is that why there are 2 inland ports now in South Carolina?
I think Jim Newsom's figured out a lot of things. And in fact, I think those inland ports will have and will benefit both states. But I think he's definitely figured that out. With regard to infrastructure, the one thing that just is sometimes a little bit puzzling to me is the various folks that will oppose our efforts to fund infrastructure don't realize it's the ultimate conservative public-private partnership. The roads are built by private companies. The money, if you use a gas tax, and I don't say user fee, it's tax. If you use a gas tax, it is provided by the users. You basically have taken out everything but the middleman, which was DOT. And with Christy Hall coming in here, you'll see pretty quickly that our middleman has improved greatly, and middlewoman has improved greatly in South Carolina. So, it's something that we're going to deal with. I think it's not easy. It's a little painful to get there. But I'm hoping that folks will realize that this is the ultimate public-private partnership. It is the one thing that government does well that can actually create jobs in the private sector, and we need to move forward and make it happen.
Lewis, do you think that the South Carolina General Assembly, that the State House, do you think they're going to have meaningful transportation bill this year? Because it sure doesn't sound like it.
They're moving in that direction. There are, I think it's, again, that old adage about sausage and legislation.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely is happening in South Carolina right now with regard to roads, but I'm pretty confident they understand the need. There are several options out there that any of them could provide help, whether it's the ultimate fix or not, no. But I think it'll be a 2 to 4 year process. We'll see some progress this year. We'll see some progress next year. 3 or 4 years from now, we come back here and we'll say South Carolina's on top of its road situation.
Yeah. Do you think North Carolina, you hearing anything in the North Carolina short session that would be encouraging around transportation?
Not in the short session. I will say this too. We talk about roads. Don't forget the ports. That is so important. South Carolina is working with Savannah. If you talk about where the growth will be, look at the Triad. You have 5 interstates or proposed interstates intersecting within the Triad region, and it's closer to Norfolk. And with the Panamax ships coming in, you need 50 feet of water. That means a lot of dredging at Charleston or Savannah. Wilmington's a small port anyway. Norfolk has 50 feet naturally. It's the only place on the East Coast that has 50 feet naturally. So you're going to see a lot of the traffic perhaps be...
And let me say this quickly, because we only got a minute left. The Triad just scuttled another plan to have any kind of light rail. I mean, they're going in the wrong direction around a transportation hub for the Triad, though, aren't they?
Well, that's moving people, and that's important.
Yeah.
But moving the goods, and with the FedEx hub, with Honda Jet there now, with 5 interstates coming in, and if you look at where the goods go, that's where the commerce is going to create the money.
I stand corrected. I meant the Triangle just scuttled another light rail project. It was up
Yeah.
around Durham, but thank you.
No, we don't talk much about the triad, but keep an eye on it.
Yeah, we will. Thank you, gentlemen. And you are off the hook. We're not going to ask you a question about interest rates.
Or
However,
negative
are they
rates.
going higher this year?
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Nice answer. Nice step aside there. Gentlemen, thank you for being on the program. Always nice to have you here. It's good to see you.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
invitation.
Thank you. Thank you for watching our program. Any questions or comments, please carolinabusinessreview.org. Thanks for watching. Until next week, good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton, operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.